everybody? It's Enoch the Poet, the CEO and founder of Black Minds Publishing, and you are now watching Inside the Mind. And a lot of the poem really is a rumination on the middle school period of my life for the most part. A lot of it is just a deep dive into that 3 years from 6th to 8th grade for me, because it was, I think, a very pivotal time in my life where a lot of shifts were happening for me internally. Definitely, I think the spark to me becoming the person that, sits here right now, honestly. And kind of just taking note of my environment and listing out what I was coming in contact with in a way that isn't, really, I guess, like fancifully poetic. It's not a lot of metaphor or simile or allegory in this poem. It's a lot of straightforward talk, but still very much, I think, for me at least, one of my favorite poems in the book. Raw black, lustful, curved spine and soft skin, hard shell cancer. This poem started kind of as a free write and a poetry workshop led by the good homie Kerwin Sutherland, where he had us kind of do what's called like an ars poetica, which is like a poem about the aspects of poetry or aspects of ourselves. And so, I think it's just very reminiscent of how we often start out, right? Very, very simple, very straightforward. And as things develop, as we grow, as we experience life, things get more complicated, things get longer, things get more drawn out. And I kind of unintentionally move towards that in this poem. And so I start things very, very simple, and things just get more and more elaborate as the poem goes on. Bald-headed Medusa stared at my reflection so long, I stoned myself. Dry-eyed bastard child of Northside Wilmington griot of the broken home thug with a pen, black Chiha, last of my lineage massacres. Recovering. Everybody that knows me knows I am a huge anime fan. Naruto being one of my favorites, right? And I don't mean that, stereotypical way or whatever, but Naruto is just a really good story about some childhood niggas repping they sets, you feel me, in they village hoods. But anyway, when I say Black Uchiha, last of my lineage, it's a reference to anime, which I think is a large part of my person and creativity, but also a reference to my family story, because I am pretty much the only person left in my lineage with the last name Church. And so in a lot of ways, I do feel very Sasuke-like sometimes with, not only my moodiness, but the fact that I kind of feel like the last survivor sometimes when it comes to my family name. I feel like sometimes it's on me to carry that into the next generation. Bourbon body, fire-throated, scorched-skinned West African descendant planted, country watered in a city garden, raised on cornmeal pancakes and scrapple, raised on cloudy water and 40 ounces, and Jesus Christ and crack rocks, and New York fried chicken on Market Street and Pete's Pizza and Easy Mart, where I used to steal hot pickles in AI Middle, where dude punched a girl in the face for taking a seat in social studies with Mr. Martin, wore dress shoes with no socks and shot the fair one with Jerron because he got tired of the ashy ankle jokes where the cops was called a few times. So AI Middle had, I guess, what most schools now will call like climate control. Is basically like, a hall monitor or the person who roams the halls to make sure that ain't no wild shit popping off. And for us, it was Mr. Martin, Right, Mr. Martin was this tall, light-skinned, bald dude, and everyone used to joke him because he wore dress shoes every day, every single day, for the whole 3 years that I was there, and never wore socks with him. And one day after school, Jerron, who was another student in my grade at the time, this was probably 7th or 8th grade, was ragging on him. And I guess he got tired of it. And so, this grown man fought this student. And, they called the cops, of course. And Jerron's mom came, and then that was a whole thing. And it was a wild situation to watch. To say the least, it was a wild situation to watch. Where Eric thought I was weak because I let niggas clown me, and he found out the hard way that my hands was faster than my comebacks. Where most niggas thought I was angry, but at that age, anger is usually just emotions we ain't been taught to process because our parents weren't taught to process. And their parents weren't either. There was a lot that I experienced at AI Middle that I didn't have the emotional understanding to process, I think, in ways that were helpful. And so a lot of those emotions of loneliness, a lot of those emotions of distance, a lot of that need for acceptance from peers, because I used to get teased a lot. A lot of it just turned into frustration and anger, which then turned into violence, right? So it's like I'm throwing hands with kids over the smallest things, and from the outside looking in, I just look like an angry boy. Wilding out, throwing tantrums and shit. But really, I think at the end of the day, what it boils down to is me being sad and me feeling isolated and not having the words for that, or feeling like I had an outlet to discuss that with anybody. And how could they be? I come from a household where silence was tradition, where you don't have a teary eye unless you're in front of a casket, where a boy much older than me killed a piece of me 3 rooms down from Auntie's room, and I ain't go back to that house until her funeral almost 20 years later, and it was still silent there. And I was still silent there. But I've gotten better with speaking now. I've gotten better with anger now when I see emotions and I name them and I make space for myself, and some of my friends see me for me and some of my friends don't, and I make peace with that in my own way. I make peace, and I'm doing better, and I'm doing better, and I'm doing better, and I'm paying attention to who loves me the right ways and spending less time complaining about who don't. And I say we when I talk to my niggas about anything, because if one of us go through, then we all do. That's how family work. When I say family, I mean the ones I chose. I am absolutely not a believer in that whole blood is thicker than water bullshit. I don't believe in family that's given in the ways in which I think most of us think about it, right? Like, all us being related means is that we share genetics. That's it. I think family is a title that you earn through, unified struggle, through unified joy, through experiencing things together. I can't call somebody family who ain't never been there for me. I can't call somebody family who ain't never supported me. And I can't call somebody family who ain't never been in the trenches with me, right? Right or wrong, that's really how I think about it. So, if you toxic and we related, I don't have an obligation to put up with that, right? Life is all about the family that we choose, because those are the people who have our best interests in mind and are our healthiest relationships, I think. Life is all about choosing and listening. And listening before you choose, and unconditioning, and freedom is mostly about freedom. The freedoms you give, the freedoms you get, and the freedoms you take back, because they were always yours to begin with. I love the ending lines about freedom in this poem so much, because I feel like they really just encapsulate my mindset and what I was processing throughout the entire creation of this book. There's so much about freedom for me that is wrapped up in addressing these ghosts in my lineage, addressing these demons in my lineage, addressing these traumas and my childhood experiences, and the traumas that were passed down to me, right? I talk a lot about that in the manuscript, and so much of that is tied into how free I feel I can be. And you know, continuing to address these as I stare these things down and come into contact with these things and admit certain things to myself and let go of certain things, I always feel like I'm becoming more free. I'm becoming more myself, and I'm becoming more empowered to be that self in all the spaces that I inhabit, right? And me embracing my freedom gives somebody else the empowerment to embrace theirs, right? So the freedoms we give, you know, the freedoms we take back, because sometimes there are freedoms that are stolen from us, right? I was put in positions where I had to be more mature than what my age was very early on in life, right? And there's a childhood freedom that was taken from me that I think in doing a lot of this unpacking, I am reclaiming for myself. There's new ways of joy and new ways of happiness that I'm coming into contact with by venturing back into those spaces and making sense of it all. And yeah, I just really feel like this was the perfect way for me to wrap up the book, and the perfect way for me to wrap up the poem.